Yes, the Burevestnik. I didn't want to make a full video about this subject because there is simply not enough information about this weapon. However, there was something in the back of my mind that sort of made me feel uneasy. In fact, what is the rationale for such a weapon? I mean, it's not a new idea, but why now? And what for?
Sir, some of the viewers don't know what you are talking about.
Yes, sorry. The Burevestnik is a long-range, very heavy Russian cruise missile that has the peculiarity of being propelled by a nuclear thermal engine that gives it, for all intents and purposes, an unlimited range. Range and endurance are, in fact, the defining feature of this weapon. However, there are legitimate doubts on the effectiveness of such a solution. I mean, it is a subsonic cruise missile at the end of the day, with all the consequent limitations. So I did what sometimes I do when I can't put my finger on a problem. And I checked the work of other Western orthodoxy-aligned analysts that I know hardly get Russia and China right. So whatever was their conclusion, it should have been the wrong one. And indeed, the consensus among these analysts attributes the weapon rationale to a mix of reasons connected to the Russian industrial military complex, the Russian internal power dynamics, and internal propaganda. In general, they judge the Burevestnik a waste of precious resources in the middle of a war. The Western reply should be do nothing, because there is no real additional threat with such a weapon. And after reading this, well, the answer became straightforward. In fact, the Burevestnik has a clear military and strategic rationale. You just have to put yourself in Russia's shoes. So, welcome, I am Gas, he is Otis, and this is Millennium 7. So before going on with the video, a word about the sponsor of this video, which is, in this case, myself, in the sense that finally, after a lot of requests that I have received in the last few years, merchandising is available. There is a new shop where you can buy hoodies or t-shirts with the logo, with the channel logo, or with the picture of our friend Otis.
I am proud, sir. It is a great moment for all appliances, sir.
Okay. There's also mugs, stickers, and a number of other things. I really invite you to go, look, and if you like what you see, just buy something, because this is a very good way of supporting the channel. And now, on with the video. So plenty of YouTubers have made 30 minutes long videos about the Burevestnik, where 28 minutes are occupied by the history of nuclear thermal propulsion, and the remaining 2 by the admission that we really know nothing about the missile. I will skip all that. It is enough to know that the concept has been around since the 50s, so it's not new. What is new, though, is the Russian capability of turning it into a viable solution to propel a cruise missile. In fact, the reasons why such propulsion was never mainstream are weight and dispersion of radioactive material in the environment, either from the exhaust or because of incidents involving the nuclear reactor. No radioactive spread has been recorded recently in the Arctic in the days before or after the successful test announced on the 21st of October 2025. And since the missile flew for 15 hours at high subsonic speed, if there was radionuclide dispersion, it would have been detected by the monitoring stations around the Arctic. Nuclear material spread was detected on the 9th of August 2019 when an incident happened at the Nyonoska test site on the White Sea. In the incident, 5 people lost their lives, and it is generally considered to be related to the Burevestnik, even though it was never confirmed as such. In general, the missile development was indeed quite complex, and several tests failed till recently. Of the missile configuration, we know nothing. We have few images of some large cruise missiles under tarpaulins in what seem to be launch canisters, And that's it. From the pictures and from some Russian sources, the length of the missile is estimated to be 11 meters, 3 of which are occupied by the booster. The weapon seems to be launched from the ground by a rail, even though this should be just a test arrangement, and the missile most likely will be road mobile. I have heard all sorts of numbers for the weight, from 6 to 20 tons at takeoff. By comparison, the KH-101, which is a big cruise missile, is about 7.5 meters long and it weighs about 2,500 kilos. Problem is, the Burevestnik carries a nuclear reactor, a small one, but a nuclear reactor with dense and heavy materials, so it's difficult to make an estimate. I am inclined to think that it is towards the lower mark, around 6 or 7 tons, but it is just my speculation. The general configuration is the classic configuration of a cruise missile with a square-ish body and small wings. There is not much stealth shaping, the sides are inclined, but it is safe to assume it will be covered with radar-absorbing materials, at least in the production variant. There is also a video of the missile in flight, allegedly, but it seems different from the factory images. It seems to have a large booster attached below the missile body. This could be just a test configuration, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense to store the missile in canisters. The guidance is not known, but there are not that many alternatives for a long-range cruise missile, particularly if it is designed to attack fixed target, like seems to be the case. It would surely use satellite navigation with inertial guidance as a backup. From the picture, it seems that there is no terminal guidance. The missile doesn't seem to feature a radome, but a small radar could be disguised in the nose to help navigation and terminal guidance. But obviously the elephant in the... He followed me here. I can't believe it. He followed me in Italy.
Hi Alfie, thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming. So, coming to propulsion, we have exactly zero info in the sources other than confirming that it is a thermal nuclear engine. Nuclear thermal means that the source of heat is not burning fuel, but a nuclear reactor. As I said, no details have been published, but we can speculate. Since there is no radioactive leak, there should be a heat exchanger in place of the combustion chamber. We have no idea about the configuration. Is the nuclear material inside the exchanger? Is there a working fluid that transfers the heat? We just don't know. Considering that, in the test, the missile flew for 14,000 kilometers in 15 hours, the average speed is about 1,070 kilometers per hour, that is Mach 0.86. This is high subsonic speed. In theory, a ramjet could work at this speed, and no moving parts would be a good thing for a weapon that could stay airborne for days. The flip side would be that at that speed, a ramjet is really inefficient, and it is yet to be seen if it could produce the necessary thrust. Furthermore, there is the problem of power generation for the missile systems. It could use a thermal generator, but these are not very efficient as well. And with a ramjet, what about the hydraulics, if any? So the most likely option is that the engine is either a turbojet or a turbofan with a combustion chamber replaced by the heat exchanger. This may limit the airborne time because at some point the engine oil runs out, but it is absolutely possible to build a turbofan capable of a few days of continuous work. In this case, electric and hydraulic power will be driven by the engine gearbox, as it happens on basically every aircraft. In fact, on a conventional missile where the flight may last a few hours at the most, it is possible to use batteries and reservoirs for the fluid. In this case, where the missile could fly for days, something else is surely needed. And yes, airborne for days. This brings us to the key point, which is always the same. Why this missile even exists? As I said, the consensus among Western-aligned analysts is that this is little more than a PR stunt. However, There are some, you can call them logical tests, that are commonly used to understand why a weapon should exist, the rationale for having a specific type of weapon. This is just a simplified framework, but it is enough to understand why most analysts are wrong and why the Burevestnik might have an important impact on the strategic equilibrium. So let's go point by point. Does it fulfill a military role? Obviously, the role is to deliver a nuclear weapon penetrating the opponent's defenses. I don't see the Burevestnik delivering conventional warheads simply because if you crash it on a target, you also distribute radioactive material in the surrounding environment. It would behave as a very powerful dirty bomb, which may have a utility as a terror weapon or for a false flag, but I think we can exclude safely it was ever thought for this mission. Most analysts, though, agree that long-range cruise missiles are not a very good idea because they are vulnerable to modern air defenses. Yes. So I suppose that the various JASM, RASM, Naval Strike Missile, Storm Shadow and so on, they are all on the verge of being decommissioned, aren't they? Okay, they're not nuclear, and the range may not be that long, but they are all cruise missiles, and they are considered at the high end of the category. If a cruise missile is vulnerable to air defenses, then why these weapons are still the backbone of Western long-range attack capability? So, in reality, a stealth cruise missile flying very low on broken terrain is a difficult target, even for the most modern fighters. The relatively high rate of interception that these weapons have in Ukraine are, in good part, due to the flatness of the territory. Sure, intercontinental ballistic missiles are much less likely to be intercepted than nuclear cruise missiles, but this takes us to the next point. Is it more effective and efficient of other systems or combination of systems in the same role? The objection is, if we wanted to build a 15,000 kilometers range conventionally powered missile, it would be possible without incurring in the cost, weight and environmental penalties, which are associated with the nuclear thermal propulsion. Sure, not an easy feat, but it would be possible. After all, Russia already has the KH-101, which can carry a nuclear warhead, which is capable of reaching from Russian territory the whole of Europe and most of the possible targets in the Western Pacific. Furthermore, if you consider ICBMs, they have the same global range, they are much more difficult targets than a cruise missile, and they do the job of delivering nuclear weapons much quicker. SLBMs at sea are extremely well protected and guarantee a counter-strike capability. Look sensible in it? Well, this is the kind of circular reasoning that drove me mad in my other life when I was an IT consultant. First, thinking in terms of a solution to a specific requirement is idiotic. You have to think about solving an entire class of requirements because it is guaranteed that a single isolated problem will soon spawn connected issues with similarities and overlaps. You will soon have a class of requirements. And this mindset is indeed quite normal elsewhere. Aircraft are often multi-role, for example, so I don't understand why the same reasoning should not be applied to the Burevestnik. In fact, the reason that the requirement is not only the range, it is also the endurance, two different strategic dimensions. This means that a possible use case is that the missile can be launched, then flown at random above the southern oceans, far from any sensor, ready to appear when an order is given or no order is given, meaning that the command chain has been destroyed. A weapon capable of approaching from every direction would force the United States and Europe into a defensive approach that would cover all the 360 degrees, greatly multiplying the necessity of air defenses, which, by the way, are already in short supply. For example, you might need an AWACS constantly flying over the Azores with a flight of fighters only to keep track of a potential cruise missile approaching from the South Atlantic. And in case of conflict, those aircraft will be there doing basically nothing 99% of the time, rather than doing something more immediately useful. Furthermore, over the sea, it's easy, but over land, you need to remember that every time you shoot down a Burevestnik, you spread radioactive material in the environment. So it is better than you shoot it down as far as possible. But as far as possible is usually near someone else who could not be that happy that you shoot one down near their fishing fleet or their water reservoirs. You may object, well, since there is no defense against the ICBMs and the MAD doctrine assures deterrence, why would you care for just another vector? Well, this is the era of the Golden Dome, where the United States are trying to get out of the MAD logic, and the Allies have asked for coverage too, some of them at least. A space-based Golden Dome integrated with ground-based kinematic interceptors is useless against the Burevestnik. Sure, the space-based sensors could be capable of detecting the missile everywhere in the world if they work as promised, but engaging it will remain a very, very complex problem that will force your defensive assets to spread. If 1 and 2 are true, is the purpose important enough to justify the cost of introducing it? At this point, it should be clear that the real purpose of the Burevestnik is not just adding a new nuclear delivery vector that is more difficult to contrast than those already existing. And to be fair, probably isn't. The real purpose is to force the West, that can't ignore it, into taking action to defend against a different and previously non-existent type of nuclear threat with new tactics and new systems. And this threat has also the function of redefining the current nuclear equilibrium to respond to challenges like the Golden Dome or the progressive dismemberment of all the nuclear weapons limitation treaties. Is this a purpose important enough to justify the existence of such a complex and most likely expensive weapon? Well, you be the judge.
That is an underwhelming final, sir.
Otis, come on. So thank you very much for watching this rather grim video so far. I would like to remind you of the new merchandising shop that is available now. All the links are in the description. But you can also support the channel by being a member or being a patron, or there are some other ways available. Again, all the links are in the description. An enormous thank you to all those who have already helped. I will never thank you enough. If you can support the channel financially, just subscribe if you haven't, hit the bell, leave a like, leave a comment, because if you want to be notified when a new video drops, interacting in this way with the current algorithm is the best way. So, this is it. Thank you very, very, very much for watching, and see you next time.